Hey YouTube, it's Eric. I have to make this video pretty quick just because I'm really busy with schoolwork and work. But I just want to make a recommendation to you guys that you guys should check out the writings of Joesph McCabe. He was a English writer. Just from when I read, like the guy was a genius. He wrote over like 60 books. Probably wrote like over 20 books criticizing the Vatican. McCabe was a ex Roman Catholic priest in Belgium, and he just gives out great information. Like I found like H.G. Wells. I was reading H.G. Wells's book Crux Ansata, which I do recommend. Crux Ansata by H.G. Wells is a good book. It was published in 1943. But H.G. Wells says that Joesph McCabe like is by far was by far the best um, Reformation scholar. So like, that made me curious to want to check out the guy's work. And I found out like I'll show you. I linked his page on archive.org, but I've been reading his book, A History of the Popes, that was written in 1939, and like it's classic. It's fantastic. It's well sourced. It's just it's fantastic scholarly research. The guy is a genius. I mean, this is Joesph McCabe here. I interestingly Peter J. Doiswick, who I recommended his book Catholic Victory in 1960. Doiswick uh like had read all of McCabe's work, and in Doiswick's book Catholic Victory in 1960, he quotes McCabe saying that there were Jesuits in Belgium that were like disguising themselves as Protestant preachers. You see here, Joesph McCabe. It even says on his Wikipedia page. You see, although he is now largely forgotten, he was one of the greatest mouthpieces of free thought in England. You see, Joesph McCabe. He was an English writer, speaker on free thought after having been a Roman Catholic priest earlier in his life. You see here, he was a staunch critic of the Catholic Church. He was pretty staunch, and even like I'm just gonna show you a little quick excerpt from the book The History of the Popes. This is the Jesuit Daniel Aloysius Lord who drafted the Hollywood production code. I have the autobiography of Father Daniel Aloysius Lord S.J. His autobiography was written in 1955. But Joseph McCabe, the Daniel A. Lord S.J. wrote a slander piece against Joseph McCabe in a pamphlet called "I Can Read Anything." I linked the pamphlet in the description box of the Jesuit Father Lord. But so McCabe here is talking about the Catholic system of it's like historical dishonesty and like censorship. So McCabe says an example of the system reaches me when I was writing this chapter, the Catholic Truth Society of Ireland. This is from the book The History of the Popes. Um, so the Catholic Truth Society of Ireland has, with the permission of the Archbishop of Dublin, published a pamphlet by the American Jesuit Father Lord titled "I Can Read Anything," for the purpose of warning young folk against quote bad books end quote. The Jesuits warning his flock against reading bad books. After saying that the critics of the church have quote trained clever, brilliant minds end quote, another American Jesuit describes me as of having quote the mind of a peasant end quote. And Father Daniel A. Lord goes on. This is quoting from the Jesuit Father Daniel Aloysius Lord, who drafted the 1930 Hollywood production code, and he admits it in his autobiography. If you want to see excerpts from that, I put quotes of from Lord's autobiography into a blog post I did on the Hollywood production code. This is a quote from the Jesuit Daniel Lord. And when they are utterly unscrupulous, as let's say Joesph McCabe is, and will twist any bit of history to make a case and pile yarn on yarn to construct a proof and use fable for fact and supposition for solid argument, what chance has the average reader against them? That's the quote from the Jesuit. Back to Joesph McCabe. This Jesuit is perfectly aware that in spite of this alleged vulnerability of mine, they have never published a criticism of a single one of the 50 historical works I have written. The English Catholic True Society has not included the scurriest pamphlet in its list. In this country, I could ask the opinion of a court on the matter. But this is a great book here. I gotta get going, so I can't make this video too long. But I'll show you just the books that I've downloaded already of McCabe on the internet. This is the History of the Popes. This is like a long book, 500 pages, packed with information. Great information, just showing like the barbarity, just in like the vice of the papacy in the Dark Ages, and how it's continued up to this day. This book is really good here. This is the Papacy and Politics Today. The History of the Popes came out in 1939. This is the second edition of the Papacy and Politics Today. The first edition came out in 1937. This one came out in 1939. Um, He wrote a whole book on the Jesuits called A Candid History of the Jesuits in 1919, which is I haven't gone through this yet, but it looks like it's a great book. It's 460 pages. He also wrote a book, The Decay of the Church of Rome. He wrote that one in 1908. Interesting. He wrote this later in his life, how Christianity grew out of paganism. This is like a pamphlet, 13 pages, but this is some interesting information as well. Yeah, this is H.G. Wells. Here, I'll show you what Wells said about McCabe. Okay, so this is Wells. So H.G. Wells says McCabe is one of the most able and interesting and learned of all the anti-Catholic writers, and like all the most thoroughgoing reformers in the past, he sprang from the bosom of the Church. He began life with a soundly Roman Catholic upbringing. McCabe was born in 1867. He was a Franciscan monk at 16, a priest at 23, a professor of scholastic philosophy for 4 years, and then the rector of Buckingham College. His clerical title, which he had ceased to use, is the Very Reverend Father Anthony. He broke away from the church, and actually, McCabe, I know he wrote a book in 1896, like explaining why he left the church. I linked his archive.org. Where is that here? Give me a second. I linked this in the description, but it's like a list of all of it. This is like there's a ton of Joesph McCabe books on archive.org. Um, it might have actually, this was a separate book. He wrote, yeah, this he wrote. He writes on his experiences as a Catholic priest in this book here, 12 years in a monastery. Here's the decay of the Church of Rome. Um, church discipline. This book's a rent only, but McCabe wrote a book on how like the Encyclopedia Britannica is like censoring and like changing history. And Peter Doiswick also comments in his book how like the Jesuits are altering the Encyclopedia Britannica. Even like McCabe, like he was just he was a genius. Like, he wrote on the ice ages. He wrote on like prehistoric man. He wrote on like evolution. He wrote on philosophy, comparative religion. So actually, yeah, so this is the book here that he wrote in 1896, like why he left the church. It's called. I haven't downloaded this yet, but I will. It's called From Rome to Rationalism: Why I Left the Church. This was his 1986 book. Yeah, I gotta keep this video quick. I just came across this guy Joesph McCabe, and it's just like the guy was a genius. I'm really glad I came across his work. And it even says on his Wikipedia like he's like today like he is like mostly forgotten. Like I'm sure like most people I'm sure most people haven't heard of Joesph McCabe. Yeah, but that's all for this one, YouTube. Peace and love. I linked the archive.org page so you can check out his stuff. And I linked this page of this is the pamphlet that the Jesuit Daniel A. Lord S.J. This is the Jesuit who wrote the Hollywood Production Code. This is the pamphlet he wrote. I can read anything where he like attacks Joesph McCabe. And Joesph McCabe rightfully says that these Jesuits had never like actually criticized any of his historical works because like McCabe like uses thousands of references in his books. You'll see when you start reading it. But yeah, that's all for this one, YouTube. Peace and love, and namaste.